Okay.
Hi, everybody. This is Nora from the Lodi Whittier Library, and I'm here today with Tom Bruce and Rob Snyder of the musical duo High Anxiety Cabaret. And they're going to be joining us on August 13th, Friday the 13th, at 8:30 p.m. for an outdoor showing of a werewolf horror classic from 1941. And they are going to provide the musical accompaniment and sound effects, and we're going to silence the film purposely and bring up the captions, and it's going to be very, very fun. Would one of you like walk us through a little bit about how this is a calling back to how silent films used to be, like the orchestra?
Sure. I mean, originally when silent films were shown, they were generally accompanied by someone in the movie theater, often either on piano if it was a low rent joint, or in some of the larger houses, vaudeville houses, the accompaniment would be on an organ of some sort, the so-called mighty Wurlitzer. And this actually persisted well into the 1970s. I remember taking a show into a house in Beaumont, Texas, where there was a guy who played the organ before every performance, and the fact that he was playing Boffo Broadway show tunes before a performance of Madame Butterfly didn't seem to bother anybody very much. But it was a tradition that persisted for a long time.
Okay. So Rob, what I'm wondering too is, you guys play like electronic music, so very modern type instruments and the use of computers and iPads and stuff like that. How do you think like that kind of new age treatment of like a very old movie, like how that's going to jive? What do you think?
Well, hopefully well, and enough that we're not run out of Lodi, never to be allowed in again. But you know,
you won't be run out.
electronic music, I mean, is a big kind of all-encompassing term, and it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean dance music. It can mean experimental avant-garde things. We use primarily electronic instruments, although what I think is interesting about this performance is that Tom has built some practical effects to go with the more modern stuff. But it's not just that we are doing the same music you would have heard on the Wurlitzer just on a synthesizer.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the advantages that some of these tools give us to approach the ideas of theory and harmony and song structure in a different way. I mean, who's to say, had these tools been available in 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, what silent films would have been like? So different or not, I don't know, but different.
Now, I know you guys in preparing this work that you have watched the movie, right?
Oh no.
What did you think?
No, that would be just approaching it backwards.
Right. That'd be cheating.
You've never watched the movie?
Of course we have.
Of course we have.
It's like, what?
Many times now, actually.
I was going to say,
Okay.
perhaps more than we should have.
Yes.
My beard has actually gotten longer.
I can
As a
imagine.
result of watching the movie.
Tom, what are your thoughts on the movie, like from modern day perspective, but also like how you think it was received back in the day?
You know, I really have no idea how it was received at the time, although obviously the late 30s, early 40s were sort of the beginning of well, they weren't really the beginning of the horror movie genre, but they were sort of a resurgence of it. I mean, it's kind of interesting to me in some ways that this movie was released in the early days of World War II, which seems sort of bizarre on some level. And the fact of the matter is, meaning no disrespect to a potential audience that would, of course, love to see it, it's not a very good movie.
All right, Tom has to go.
in some ways, I mean, it tries to make a number of actually very, very interesting points kind of all at once. And sometimes it loses its way a little bit. It's not, actually, come to think of it, it really is a sign that it was kind of early days for the genre, and they were experimenting with things a little bit, right? I mean, there's just a little bit more. Uh, how to put it? There's more of a sort of class consciousness in it than you would expect from a horror movie.
Really?
There's a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's strange in a way. There's a little bit more kind of monster as alienated person thing going on, kind of in the background. It's interesting because they very clearly are experimenting with something that is in some ways pretty new. Um, all that said, I mean, the earliest silent horror movies started in what, the teens, 1915, 1917. When was Nosferatu released? That's the first one that everybody knows.
Right, and I think it was either 17 or 1917 or 1919.
Wow.
So they've been around for 20 years or so, but I don't think they'd been around with sound, and I don't think they'd been around with this kind of setting, right? I mean, in some ways, Wolfman is a precursor more of the Hammer films of the 60s than it is of anything else, I think. I don't know, Rob. You're much more eloquent on the subject of this flick than I am.
Am I now?
Yeah.
So I guess I share many of Tom's thoughts, and it's not, I think it was well received. From what I've read, it was well received, maybe not at the time, but shortly thereafter because of its production value. That's what's most often cited about the movie. And yeah, actually, it's does not look to me like a 1941 film. The cinematography is fairly advanced. That being said, it's not a silent movie, and the fact that we're treating it like a silent movie and turning all the dialogue off doesn't really hurt the movie any. It's totally like, we'll have the subtitles on, but if subtitles are not your thing, you're not missing a whole ton. And in fact, putting your own interpretation to the movie might make it more enjoyable than trying to struggle along with the dialogue that's there.
I was actually thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I'm not normally inclined to think about makeup and costume as being a thing, but I suspect that was probably the biggest advance there. I mean, the Wolfman sort of costuming, makeup, transformation stuff is all really pretty advanced.
Although you don't see that much of it.
No, probably because it was expensive as hell to do. I mean, that's the usual reason why you don't see much of something in a movie. It's expensive.
So a question I get a lot at the library is, how scary is this movie? Like, what are your thoughts on that? I don't think it's very scary, but
I don't think it's terribly scary either, and to some extent we're undercutting it a little bit by, we make a little fun of it in places, sort of, mostly by kind of overdoing things.
You mean with the performance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, with the music. I mean, the music occasionally takes on. It's a little. We're mocking it a little bit in spots. Not a lot, but I don't think it's horribly scary. I mean, certainly for anybody who has seen any kind of modern horror movie, it's not going to be scary at all. I don't think you actually see any blood ever.
No, I don't recall that. It's not very graphic at all.
No, the violence is all
psychological, what you imagine.
Right, but even that, like psychologically, there's not a lot left to the imagination. I mean, the scenes are hidden, like the violent scenes are hidden behind trees, but you're not wondering what's really happening. So the kind of the tropes that people like talk about being fearful of don't exist in this movie. There's no cuts, there's no things popping out, there's no loud explosions, there's no sense of impending dread. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I kind of find that quaint in a way.
I found the dating rituals to be the scariest part of the movie.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. That and the characterization of the gypsies. But yeah.
Exactly. So I see in this window a picture of your gear. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? Is there going to be any howling? What are these like created instruments that are going to be used specifically for this performance? Maybe you want to talk about that.
Is there a way, Nora, for you to bring the gear cam up on the large central part of the screen? We can say a little bit about stuff, and I think it would be helpful to have it bigger if we can. I'm half a house away from it at this point.
If you look put your mouse over the small picture of it, you should get 3 dots that appear and a pin option.
Oh, wait a minute. Aha! I can do it. Yay!
Thank God.
So
Yep.
I don't know, Rob. You want to start with your stuff? He's on the right. I'm on the left.
Yes. So I'm using a combination of things. I'm not quite as crafty as Tom, so I didn't build anything for this. Although there is a point where I attempt to do something interesting with the tambourine. We'll see how that goes. But generally, I base everything around the use of a laptop computer. So you can see my Mac sitting there open on top of that case. And that's kind of the brains of my setup. All the sound goes into that. It's processed through that, and then it goes off to the mixer, to the PA to be heard. A lot of what I'm doing is playing one of those 2 synthesizers you can see to the right. The top is a smaller analog. The one in the middle is a larger analog synth. Or on the small table there in front of that is, or would be if it were not actually here with me, an iPad where I have some supplemental apps. But I focus a lot of what I'm doing on those 2 synthesizers and trying to sculpt sound with those 2. That's the bulk of what my rig is.
So then, as to my stuff, I'm gonna start at the top. If you look in the upper left corner of the screen, you'll see a kind of a blue IKEA chair, and just to the right of that, there's a frame and some other stuff sitting there with a mic boom. Those are both acoustic effects. The frame with the handle and the rope wrapped around the center stick there is actually a thing that makes creaking noises. The thing to its right is a shop bell, such as you would find on the door of a shop in a small English village, because I think they open and close that door about 719 times in like the first scene.
Yes.
And God, is it annoying. But anyway, there's also a bunch of other acoustic stuff. We simulate the beating of the various wolfmen by using a rolled up copy of The Economist to hit a cigar box. I find The Economist to be very good for acoustic effects. It's much better than, for example, Boy's Life or Highlights for Children.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, exactly.
I understood 2 words.
So if you look then at that long sort of case that's laying, on the table there, there's a box of twisty knobs at the upper right-hand corner of that mostly controls the volume of various sound effects that are controlled in turn by a little sampler that sits there just to the left of that. It's a thing with 4 knobs sticking out of it. I also use mostly iPad for instruments in this thing. I think I've got 5 or 6 instruments actually running on the iPad, most of which either do one of 2 things. They either attempt to sound like an organ, they attempt to sound like a bass, or they attempt to sound like some ooey gooey theremin type spooky effect. And that's really all there is to it. The little sampling keyboard then that's just midway down the case there has a bunch of samples loaded for things like wolf growls and wolf howls that I can actually play uh, as if they were a scale, right? So they're samples that have been arranged on the keyboard so that they can be played at particular pitches. And boy, do I overuse that. Uh, a lot. Then most of the stuff that's kind of down center in that tangle of wires and stuff is all video junk that is either there so that you can see the movie, so that we can see the movie, or so that we can record what we do when we actually perform the thing. And it's mostly not of of any real importance at all. So yeah, that's it. That's it.
So I'm getting the sense that this performance is going to be like a melding of both like ambient kind of music, like like reflecting the mood of the movie, but also like kind of Foley work, actual sound effects that are placed on the screen.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I mean, I'll let Rob speak to the music because in reality he's carrying most of that, and I'm carrying most of the Foley stuff.
Okay.
You want to talk about the music a little bit, and then I'll talk about hitting things with magazines.
Sure. I don't unfortunately hit anything during this, at least not intentionally, but there's
He's threatened me a couple of times, but
right, just out of reach. So the two instruments that I use the most have traditional piano style keyboards on them.
Mhm.
And I'm using them intentionally because this is sort of where blending the old and new comes in. There are musical motifs or ideas that are sort of traditional Western musical structures that represent different things, like the Wolfman or Larry, who's the main character before he becomes the Wolfman and foreshadows that, or Gwen, the love interest, has particular keys and melodic ideas that represent her happy or represent her being confused. That being said, the goal was to try to think about this in a different way and to leverage the work that Tom and I do to begin with. So it's not purely a Western sort of tradition of music. There's a lot of atonality. There's a lot of sort of uncomfortable sound design meant to be creepy and eerie,
Mhm.
mixed in from my side as well. But as Tom said, I do not do any of the sound effects that are on there, nor do I add a lot of the color that Tom adds using some of his tools. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, when we first talked through the piece, there really was this question of, how much are we going to try to make this, kind of standard horror movie ooga booga music, and I think we've done a pretty good job of avoiding all of the standard cliches while still being able to do some of the stuff that classic horror movie tracks do, right? I mean, they sound scary, and at times they impart a sense of both tension or suspense and some kind of mounting urgency. I mean, I remember saying to Rob as we were talking through the thing, okay, well, we need something Jaws like here, right? Because everybody knows that whole sort of thing. And we have our equivalents of that
Nice.
that are done on synthesizers, and then there's a lot of it that's just either atmospheric, intended to be kind of general purpose, kind of scary stuff, or in some way evocative of the setting. I mean, Rob has done a really masterful job of that in the way that some of the harmonic stuff works,
Mhm.
depending on what world we're in, right? Whether we're in the baronial mansion, or whether we're in the little antique shop, or whether we're out on the moors somewhere being scared to death. The Foley work, uh, actually, I found this, partly by virtue of my background, to be weirdly challenging, because I'm not used to having to do stuff that has to sync with things absolutely in real time
Mhm.
at the same time that I'm trying to improvise other stuff. And, you know, that has led to its share of bus wrecks in rehearsals, and it may lead to a few on the day of performance for all I know. Some of the Foley stuff, and when we talk about Foley stuff, I mean that's a term movie people use when they're talking about realistic sound effects of some
Right.
sort. So we have things that are really kind of demanded by the movie, like I mean, it opens with two people driving in a car, approaching a house. Some things that are atmospheric in some ways and not terribly naturalistic, and others that are just completely exaggerated and mostly for scary effect. Some of them were taken from the actual soundtrack, the original soundtrack of the film.
Mhm.
For example, that car noise I was talking about. Others, there's a huge world of stuff available now on the internet that I just never would have dreamed of when I was doing, you know, theatrical sound back in the 70s and 80s, because there's just so much available now. I had my choice between something like 17 different recordings of horses pulling a cart.
That sounds like a rabbit hole.
Well, it certainly can be, and I will say that I moved in there for a few days into the rabbit hole. But it's always interesting to try to get those things exactly right.
Mhm.
In fact, I'm a little bit frustrated with the horses at the moment, because at various points they're pulling a hearse. And as far as I'm concerned, none of them are trotting slowly enough. It's all just a little too fast. And trying to slow it down with any of the things that I have in my bag of tricks by way of time stretchers and pitch shifters and all of that stuff just didn't do anything for it at all. It was a very frustrating exercise trying to get those horses slowed down.
I feel pretty amazed at the specificity required for this endeavor. Like that has to be super challenging.
Well,
I never once considered that you could sample from the actual film, even though that makes total sense, but it never like actually occurred to me, but that's really cool.
So one thing that I really appreciate about Tom's approach to this is that he has nailed many of the things in the film, and he's also been really thoughtful when trying to do the thing in the film is just the wrong way to go, right? And that we shouldn't just create an effect that matches what's on screen, but we should take it somewhere else. Like there's a whole
Right.
scene in the movie, it's the return to the Romani camp, and there are people dancing, and it's just this carnival, and any attempt to make that sound like it would have sounded in the film, I think would have been ridiculous, right?
Hard.
So what we have is actually really cool. And there's a whole scene in there where I pretty much just sit back and watch Tom animate this entire thing with sound. It's very hip.
I'm getting so excited about this event. This is
yeah,
gonna be so wonderful.
but
What I had about it too was I'm not sure, like when you guys are playing, are you playing at the same time? Is this all choreographed? Is some of it like improvisational? Like what's the balance of all that?
It's all structured. And we have a piece of paper that breaks down the entire movie in 30-second to 2-minute pieces. So we know what the whole thing is.
It's a really long piece of paper. That's what I pictured.
Well, it's a virtual piece of paper. It's a Google Doc.
It's a
I'll share it with
scroll.
you. And we have TVs, little monitors set up so that we can watch the movie. We
Yeah,
are playing at the same time.
you can see them sort of toward the center of the screen. Mine is sitting in the middle of that sort of open space in the table, and Rob's is hiding slightly behind his laptop.
Yep.
So you are able to watch the film as you're.
We have to.
Because
we
how
have
would
to.
you not? Yeah.
We have to. I mean, I fully anticipate that I will get at least 6 of the time out of the 12 times that the Wolfman gets hit with something. synchronized to the actual blow that is struck in the movie, but it will only be 6 out of 12 at most.
I kind of like the idea if it's not exactly synced. I mean, that might be kind of an interesting, like an anticipatory hit.
Well, I'll be as pathetic as you want, Nora, but
I'm all in.
To answer your
Is
question,
the audience
about,
going to be able to see you play?
oh yes.
You're going to be
Yes.
like behind.
No, we're going to be right out in front of God and everybody,
Okay.
I think. I mean, we're planning on. I think we're planning on putting up a sort of a tent in case there is rain, but it's just
Oh, yes.
it's just a top cover, and we will
Mhm.
be fully visible to the audience, cursing at each other and throwing things. And,
It's a family event.
generally misbehaving.
Keep that in mind.
Well, I will wear pants.
Okay. Thank you. I was wondering what you guys think the audience's experience is going to be, just to like kind of sell this event to the people that are watching and wondering, is this going to be fun? Like,
Well,
is
I think I think it's going to be.
participation?
I think it's going to be fun. I mean, I'm just thinking about what Rob was saying about the music for the carnival. And as he said, had we done what they actually did in the film, it would have been ridiculous.
Mhm.
But we managed to pick out something that sounds like a carnival. It doesn't necessarily sound like the carnival that you're seeing,
Mhm.
but it will read to everybody as carnival. And I think if you want to sit around and sort of analyze those choices or just enjoy them, I think that's part of the fun too. And we're not above making a little bit of fun of it occasionally, like most of the time. Because it is, I mean, the thing about horror movies, as you know, is that they're very sort of heavily overloaded with stuff, and we have managed to do some of that in a way that I think is fairly funny without being without being stupid. So I think it's going to be an enjoyable experience. I don't think that anybody's going to have to cover their kids' eyes at any point.
Right.
The thing, if that's what the worry is. But I would basically say it's the sort of thing to which you should bring just a lot of popcorn.
Well, luckily we're going to have a dessert truck there. Laurel, with her putting on the mitts, dessert truck is coming, and she said she's going to have customized desserts for this event. So I'm kind of dying to see like a werewolf cupcake. Rob's in favor because he's had her stuff before, right? At Lodi in July.
oh, it's delightful. Yes.
On the other hand, if I'm going to have things thrown at me, I would prefer that it be popcorn rather than pies.
You might not have a choice.
Because it is definitely the sort of movie where you are going to want to heave some popcorn at the screen.
Don't give the Lodidians any idea. I mean, one thing we are encouraging people to do is to bring your own seating. So
Yes.
please bring your own blankets and your own chairs. And I also recommend you bring bug spray. I think didn't Judith say that she got bit up last time she was in our yard in the evening?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, everybody should
I'm
bring
always the
something.
early warning system for that, and I plan on bringing some.
Yeah. Do you guys think getting there at 8:30 probably would be? I know we're starting at dusk.
Yeah, that's hard to call. I don't know, Rob. What do you think?
I seem to recall us determining that dusk was going to be somewhere in the 8:40 to 8:45-ish time range. So I would say 8:30, maybe a little bit earlier to get some treats and to get settled in.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, this is not the longest movie in the world. It's an hour and
10
5,
minutes.
hour and 9 minutes. So if we
That's
do
a really
start
good thing to
little
bring up, actually. Yeah.
we do start a little bit later, you're not in it till 11 o'clock at night, right? It's
Mhm.
we'll be done.
It'll be wrapped up by 10 o'clock.
Right.
That's another reason why I do think it would be a good like family, event, is that it doesn't like last so long that people are getting fatigued.
Right.
No, not at all.
Cool.
And afterwards, if they want to come up and look at some of the gear that we have, and that will be there.
Talk to us about how we did stuff. We're happy to do that.
Offer any opinions on how we could have maybe done it better. That's fine too.
Should I put out a suggestion box?
Well, gear ogling, post event gear ogling is a long-standing electronic music tradition.
Yes.
I'm sure there'll be a few oglers.
It's kind of like science club.
So I can't thank you guys enough for doing this. It's a ton of work. These men are both volunteers to the library, and I think this is going to be a really great community event, especially on the heels of COVID, when we really community events are just really hard to come by. And I don't know, I think it's going to be kind of like our Lodi in July that didn't happen this year. So this is really exciting, and thank you for doing this for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
So I think what I'm going to do now is stop the recording, but Tom and Rob, if you would stay for a few minutes in the meeting room, I would love to bring in Beth and see if she has any questions about the infrastructure outside and stuff for the event.
Sure.
All right.
Got it.
Thank you again.
Got it.
Yep.
Oh, once again, I just want to tell everybody this event is on Friday, August 13th, around 8:30 p.m. at the library outside. All right. Bye-bye.